Hi, and welcome to Any Job Can Be a Climate Job, the podcast pushing for a radical movement to make every job work for our planet. We talk to people who are embedding climate action into their jobs and share ideas so that you, our listeners, can be inspired and take action. Today, I'm joined by Lumi Gardner. Lumi, you are the owner of Fuki Sushi, which is a third-generation restaurant in Palo Alto, California.
Yes.
And Lumi thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
What I really admire about you is that you're balancing building this business and carrying on the tradition from your family and all that comes along with it. But also you've been really instrumental in transforming it to be more adaptive to our changing climate. And I'm really excited to get into it with you today. We're going to talk to Lumi about what it's like to run a business, a restaurant business, which notoriously has razor thin margins, how she's been influencing vendors, adopting new technology, and completely eliminating food waste, which is unheard of in the restaurant industry. So first, I'd love to start by sharing a little bit more about the restaurant. Fuki Sushi is pretty famous, isn't it?
Oh, it's no better. Thank you.
I've heard, from what I understand, you catered Mark Zuckerberg's wedding, and
Yes.
the restaurant was featured in the book and the movie, The Dropout, and you've been featured on the History Channel about the start of Google. Can you share a little bit more about the restaurant's background?
So my parents opened Fuki Sushi back in 1978. Back then there was no Japanese restaurants. Um, People would ask why the sushi wasn't cooked. So everything was very, very new for the community. And over each decade, my parents expanded and, we grew alongside Silicon Valley and Stanford University. And so it's been a journey. Yeah. Now you see sushi in Costco. So it's a very different world.
Yeah, I had no idea what a new food it was to California, at least, or this area.
Yes.
And so you've been running the restaurant for about 30 years, but you started working there when you were 9 years old. Is that right?
Right. Well, I mean, working, I would do whatever I could, organizing account payables was like a game for me and, entering general ledger and trying to make my numbers match. But I mean, I started working at the front desk when I was 13.
Wow, amazing. And so obviously the restaurant has been a big part of your upbringing. Could you tell us a little bit more about your childhood and maybe where the spark for caring about the environment came from?
So, I mean, I don't know anything else. My life has always had Fuki Sushi in it. It opened when I was 6 months old. So
Wow.
I don't have any memories of life without Fuki. I realized at a very young age that it, the restaurant had an impact of the volume of which we produce and serve, but also the the size in which we consume things, if that makes any sense, the volume in which we consume things. So, for example, our to go section of our restaurant, how many containers we output every single day. It's a lot. And when you order takeout and you have to throw all these things away into landfill,
Yeah.
I don't feel good when I order takeout. I don't feel good throwing these things away into the garbage. Um, I don't feel so guilty at all if I just go, oh, it's all compost, and maybe that's just me, but there's there was a lot of guilt behind having all this output of waste. And I didn't know what people were doing with it. I didn't know if they were littering it. I didn't know if they were disposing of it properly. So I figured I can fix that from the beginning and just change to all compostable, and that was hard because when you change over to all compostable, you have to test every single dish and every single container and what works well and what doesn't work well. So we did all that. And then COVID hit. And then a lot of those distributors shut down. So then I had to retest all my containers, and find new distributors. But finally we got, during COVID, we transitioned to all compostable, which is, one less thing to be stressing about.
Yeah, that's really commendable and doesn't sound like it was an easy undertaking. Where do you think when you so you're like a child growing up around in and around Fuki Sushi, this restaurant. What do you think it is that you saw that your parents and other people that were working there like didn't? Like where did that come from? What was motivating you at the heart of it?
Well, in Japan, when, for example, you're training to be a chef, it's not just about making the recipes and making these dishes. A lot of their training is focused around minimizing waste. And that is actually a very fundamental mentality of Japanese culture. To be wasteful is sloppy. And that's like the worst thing that you could be in Japan is sloppy. So their training and I guess my upbringing was we don't waste anything, and because it's a reflection of your upbringing and your intellect and how well you can do a job. So even at home, we absolutely did not waste anything. And we're very efficient with everything that we did. So I guess it was really how I was brought up to have that perspective and outlook on how things should be executed and how things should not be executed.
I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about eliminating food waste and your interaction with the Santa Clara County initiatives that were going on. Can you tell us that story?
Yes. So Santa Clara County came by and they're basically going to each sector of where there might be any food waste. So hotels, schools, restaurants, and they would be coming by to inspect how much food waste we had and how we needed to dispose of that, whether it was donation or some other program that they had. And I replied, we don't have any food waste. I don't understand what you're talking about. And they said, well, you have to have food waste. You're a restaurant. I said, we don't have any food waste. Why would we have food waste? That doesn't make any sense. And so they said, well, how do you not have any food waste? And I explained to them, well, step by step from menu conception to how we purchase and our inventory and the computer and our outputs of delivery and catering and dine-in and all of this, even down to when the dishwasher is taking the food away and they're scraping the food off the plates, what is left over? Because we want customers to be either eating everything or taking everything home. Anything after that is food waste, and we don't want that. So when we update our menus, we even take that into account. Our ordering sheets, and even vegetable scrappings. How can we utilize as much as we can so we're not wasteful? And so I was explaining this to the county, and they said, "Interesting. Do you want to do a podcast for us?" So I did, and just trying to educate other restaurants on, it's mindful, but it's also just a basic, it's a good business practice because that's your bottom line in the end as well.
Right.
So if they're not interested in the sustainability and the ecological reasons behind it, it's for their bottom line. So it was an interesting podcast to do.
I love that you're getting that message out there and trying to inspire other restaurants to take some of these actions. Why do you think other restaurants don't do it, or why do you think it's hard for them?
Honestly, I doesn't compute. I'm guessing I understand that the restaurant business is so hectic and so busy, and you're doing so many things. I wear so many different hats. HR and marketing and events coordinator and, you know, just
Yeah.
everything, maintenance, equipment, IT. So I get it. But, this is just another hat that they have to realize is important to take seriously, not only for ecological reasons, which is so important to me, but in our future generations, but also the margins are so tight. They If they would just realize that it helps your margins in the long run when you implement these small practices and how you can reuse your water and how you can cut your food costs and how you can minimize waste, it makes sense in bottom line,
Mm.
so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can you walk us through what it means to like look at your menu and look at the plate? So, do you have an example that comes to mind when that like of a change you've made to your menu?
Gosh, well, I'm going through menu updates right now, actually. And so I sit down and I meet with the chefs um, in respect to what's efficient for them and what's not efficient. Anything that they say, this doesn't really go, and there's this item is a high risk for being wasted and spoiled, or
Mm.
and I speak with the servers and get their input on things that their customers really love and they ask for more of, or, things that they don't touch. It's food waste, and
Right.
we take all those factors and listen to uh, every input that we can possibly get our hands on from the dishwashers, what they see going into the garbage, and then uh, kind of meld all of that into our next iteration of our menu, and just make little tweaks here and there because it really adds up. In a restaurant, it's not just one order of this, it's
Right.
150 orders of this. So it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And it's not just food waste that you're eliminating. Share with us what you do with table water.
Oh, so it's not just table water, it's tea, so when you go out to a
Mm.
restaurant and you have a table of eight and some people drink all their water, some people don't. And you'll have all these tables and on a busy night, 200 covers, 200 glasses of half drink water is that just goes down your drain.
Yeah.
You have to it's a waste. So we actually dump all that tea. We have a tea bucket and a water bucket, and we collect it all and water our garden with that water. And it's just it's just habit now. We don't even have to think
Yeah.
about it, and that's that much less water that we have to use from a hose to water our plants. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
probably 10, what, 20, 25, 30 gallons of water a day,
Yeah.
times 300 and, 56 days. It really, really adds up.
Right. And such a simple step that any restaurant could be taking like right away.
Yeah. And not even restaurant. I mean, I do it at home. When we're
Right.
finished with dinner,
True.
we don't dump the water that we didn't drink down the sink. We give it to our plants. So a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
practices that we do in the restaurant, a lot of us carry it over to our home. To
Mm.
and I hope that a lot of the practices that we do and we publicize with our customers kind of gives them ideas to, carry on and do some things that we do here at their home as well, because it's not just corporate, it's residential as well.
Yeah, let's talk about customers a little bit because you are doing a lot to educate your customers. They're probably seeing some of these examples that you're talking about here, but you're going above and beyond and actually trying to educate them. What are you doing there?
So a few different places that I try to educate, and it's very fine line. I try to give little snippets of little facts, but not. I want to be preachy. So
Uh-huh.
we teach classes. We have sushi making classes. That's a hands-on workshop, And during that class, we actually talked to guests about how we minimize waste, um,
Oh,
and
wow.
and other things like food safety and things like that. But and then on our menu, I have like a sustainable selection side of the menu, and we have a little blurb about what we do with our table water and how we uh, recycle our frying oil and just little things that
Mm.
I want to communicate with our guests because I really want to raise that public standard of what we should expect from our restaurants, what we should um, expect from these businesses that have such a high output of what they need to be doing on a regular basis. If you think about, all the restaurants that you see in a downtown, how many of them do you
Uh-huh.
think are reusing their water? How many of them do you think take into account the food waste and how to minimize that and cut that back? If we had as the public an expectation of that to use compostable, I don't order from places that use plastic personally,
Mm. Yeah.
because that's not where I want to vote with my dollar. Um, so I think raising that expectation of businesses is where we would start to see change. As a
Yeah.
customer and a consumer of my distributors, forcing them to and really pushing them to make certain changes is what I did as a consumer to push my distributor to make certain changes. And I hope that it goes that next step to my customers having that expectation of other restaurants.
Mm. So customers, what you're saying is you can vote with your dollar. You can go to the restaurants that are using compostable takeout containers, that are watering their plants with the water from the tables, that are doing these best practices. Do you think customers can like, what's the best way for customers to find out or ask or make a request of their restaurant, like maybe their favorite restaurant?
I think ask questions. You know,
Mm.
I always have open ears. When it was years ago, and I had a customer. We used to use these like plastic sushi platters that you see, right? A lot of sushi places use them, and they're like these
Yeah.
round, huge plastic. Those are not even
Okay.
recyclable. Those are only landfill. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
so this customer's like, "What can I give these back to you to reuse them?" And I was like, "No, we can't take them back. Um, and that one question made me stop and think,
Mm.
what can I do with this so it's not landfill? So I think that when you ask the restaurants, not only like, customers are going to ask about, uh, where did this fish come from, and right, food safety things, but also,
Yeah.
planet Earth things like,
Mm.
do you have a sustainable food list? Do you, um, you know, are these recyclable? Are these, do you have compostable
Hmm.
containers? Can I have my order in a compostable container? And ask those questions of the restaurants to be able to get them to start thinking, wow, a lot more people are asking these questions. And maybe we should do something about it.
So you talked about how customers can have expectations on their favorite restaurants to be more sustainable, and how you're also pushing your suppliers and your vendors to be more sustainable. Can you tell us a story about your fish supplier and how you encourage them to change their packaging?
Right. So when at least sushi restaurants, they'll get their fish and they'll come in these big styrofoam bins. Okay. And every day we get fish and they come in, crushed ice and fish in these styrofoam bins. And for years, we would get these bins and we would just throw them out. And then I was
Uh-huh.
thinking, like, why are we throwing these away? I can just see them in a landfill every day, and that's just from me, and I felt horrible about that. So
Mm.
um
Yeah.
so I called my distributor and I said, why don't you have reusable crates? It's an
Mm.
investment, but you have to pay for this styrofoam, right? You have to pay for it to be disposed of. And it's going to save you money in the long run, right? So how about you have these reusable crates and you can just deliver it to us in those every day? They said, no, 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 no. And I said, well, I think it's really important that you consider this. Either use reusable crates or pick up our styrofoam and reuse the styrofoam and deliver it to us over and over in this. If you're not going to make the investment in these crates, otherwise I'm going to purchase my fish somewhere else. And
Good for you.
and so now they pick up the styrofoam and they wash them and they reuse them and reuse them. And I'm still pushing for the reusable crates, but I
It's
I
a start.
it's a start, and I would really like them to tell their other restaurants so they'll be picking these styrofoam boxes up, because I go out, I was walking through downtown and I saw this styrofoam crate, and I know what fish company that is by the crate. And he was just throwing it in the dumpster from that day's delivery. And I'm like, that's going to be around for like 1,000 years, and it's just,
yeah,
it drives me crazy, so
yeah. And these are daily deliveries.
daily deliveries, and I really think that the restaurant sector has a lot of places that they need to improve and not be, their margins would not be so razor thin if they were more mindful and aware of where they're losing their money.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have to produce these single use items, especially styrofoam, so big and horrible for the planet, they could really be saving a lot of money.
Yeah, it would save everybody a lot of money.
Good for you. Yeah. I hope they find reusable container options, but I like that they're at least washing them out and redelivering them.
Yes. Step by step.
Step by step. And you mentioned earlier about educating your customers about how you use cooking oil differently than other restaurants.
Yes.
Tell us about that, but also about, like, I had never thought about cooking oil in a restaurant. I mean, obviously there must be a ton of it, but I'd never thought about how it gets delivered, how it's packaged, how much of it is, how it gets disposed of. Can you share all of that with our listeners?
Yes. So every place that you go that has a fryer, okay, they will have their cooking oil delivered in this cardboard box that has a plastic jug inside of it, and they're 5-gallon boxes. And these boxes are not recyclable. Okay, they're landfill. So, I mean, we would do our best to break these cardboard boxes off the jug and clean the jug, but it's cemented so hard together, it's impossible to open up. So for us, and we're not a huge restaurant, I mean, if you think about a lot of these chains are huge, even corporations and companies that have cafes, they're getting their oil in these boxes for the most part. And so we changed over to a company that actually installed this big tank for the used oil and this big tank for the new oil. They set up a port on the outside of my building, and a truck comes by and delivers the new oil and picks up the old oil. They gave me a machine that filters the oil out. So not only do I use less oil, I purchase less oil. It gets recycled by my team, who can use it more. Then it gets picked up by the company, who then recycles it on their own, okay, and reuses it. We don't use any of those boxes, right? Those landfill boxes. And so I'm saving money and saving trash space. I'm saving, it's a win-win-win everywhere. I'd highly recommend.
Why don't you think all restaurants are using this? Awareness problem?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I probably sound like a really crazy customer when I go to restaurants. I'm like, how do you guys get your oil? The server's like, what? But I literally go and I talk to, when I go out to eat, and I'm like, and I see their menu, I'm like, how many fryers do you have in the back?
Yeah.
But I think it's a really great
I
practice.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully all of our listeners now go ask that question of restaurants. I love it. I'd love to give that oil company a plug. Do you know the name of it?
It's called RTI, RTI Restaurant Technology something. But
Okay, we'll put it
they're
in the
they're
show
great.
notes.
Yep, I will have their contact information in there. Yeah, so
Perfect.
I've been doing my best to reach out to corporations to switch over that because I know a lot of corporations in the area um, don't still use those box oils.
Mm.
And I can't. I mean, for me, I was using 40 boxes a month. So 40 times
Wow.
12, that's like almost 500 boxes of landfill a year. And that's just for my small restaurant. We only have 3 fryers.
Right.
Um, so I think that, this, it's a big change that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and it must be just easier for you. You don't even have to deal with all of this garbage. How's the pricing of it? Does it work out
Oh,
on the bottom
I,
line?
I save, I save probably $1,000 a month. Like
Wow.
yeah, I just don't understand why everybody doesn't do it. And
Okay.
bonus, you get a workers' comp credit because it's actually safer for your team. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it's so great.
that's neat. Yeah. Okay. If you're listening and you're a restaurant owner or work in the restaurant, bring in this company because,
Yeah,
like, what low hanging fruit? Good for the bottom line.
yeah.
So, talking about bottom line, it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is actually helping your margins. Do you ever feel like there's a conflict there? And how do you like mentally wrap your head around that? When do you make the trade off?
Um, Good question. One part, one thing that I have to pay a lot in is my compostable containers. And I think that most restaurants don't use compostable containers because they are a lot more expensive
Mm.
than these uh, disposable to-go containers. It's made out of corn. It's made out of, completely. I
Mm.
don't have to worry about if they dispose of it wrong because wherever it
Yeah.
goes, it'll decompose, and that gives me
Right.
peace of mind.
The the ripple effects you were sharing, like this is beyond, you're obviously an evangelist for this. You're bringing it to other restaurants. You see your neighborhood restaurants and you're promoting it. You go in as a consumer. Um, you're influencing your fish supplier. Have you seen ripple effects in your years of making intentional climate conscious decisions?
Um, well, with my distributors, so English is my first language. I know Japanese, but I was not born in Japan. So I understand that there's definitely a cultural divide of, sustainable. Like when I asked that of the distributor and they're like, what is this word? They didn't even know the word. And I said,
The word
what
sustainable?
sustainable? They're like, what is, and it's probably a language barrier. They knew it in Japanese, but
Sure.
they didn't know it in English. So they said, sustainable? What is sustainable? And it was like, like it's not bad for the earth. And, and I gave them some examples of, there's so many different reasons why this fish is sustainable and why this fish isn't just sustainable. Um, and, and so that was probably 15 years ago. And now they have a sustainable sheet. You get a sheet and an email now of what they
Yeah.
have for fish and the market prices for purchasing. And one sheet's like, these are the fish from Japan. And this whole sheet in this section is all sustainable.
Mm.
And I hope that all of my years of badgering them had something to do with that. But
I'm sure.
I'm just glad that they have that and other restaurants will purchase from that.
Right. Now, other restaurants are exposed to it. They think twice if they've never thought about it, and they can
Mhm.
make more sustainable decisions themselves.
Yes.
Good. Good for you. I love it. And on the cultural front, I think you've also had to have some tough conversations with your family, like in as terms of the menu and evolving that. Can you tell us the story about red meat?
Well, red meat was actually my mom. She
Oh,
she
good.
wanted to cut out red meat. The cost. She's like, "We're a sushi restaurant. We're not a steakhouse." I'm like, "You're right." So,
Love it.
it wasn't something that I had even thought of, and I'm so, we always call ourselves each other like a tricycle. My mom, my dad, and me, and we all have our
Hmm.
own wheels of this bike, and have our own contributions and ideas. So, it was her idea, like, we shouldn't carry red meat because it's not good for the environment. And cost is skyrocketing for red meat. Let's just focus on
Mm.
what we do. And I said, and I was the one who was like, I don't know, I think that we might have like a riot or something. Like people really like their beef teriyaki. So, but yeah, we took the plunge and we cut out the red meat, and there were a few very disgruntled customers. But I said, well, we did it for environmental reasons, and they couldn't, really argue back with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we cut out all the red meat items that used a lot of red meat, like beef teriyaki and things like that. I
Okay.
did have to bring back one beef item because the the guests were collectively very, very upset about it. So it's like, okay, I'll bring back that one item. But
Uh-huh.
otherwise, we are red meat free. Yeah. Yeah. There's, items that I cut out like 25 years ago, like Chilean sea bass, that was a huge hit with our guests. But I was like, that's a really red listed item. Like, and I kind of, I was really young, all the way back then. And I just cut it out without telling my parents. I'm like, maybe they won't notice, and and it was fine, So I started to do little things like that, little by little, and updating the menu to be more sustainable.
How did you learn, like in that Chilean sea bass example? I didn't know that that was a red listed item. How do
Mm.
you find out? How do you keep yourself educated on this?
So a lot of reading, you just read, like the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a sustainable, like what is best choice, what is avoid, what you want to avoid. And I mean,
Uh-huh.
there's certain items like in sushi that, that are avoid items that there is no alternative, and I hope that distributors will have come up with an item that will replace this avoid item. Like unagi is a avoid
Mm.
item. But there's no alternative for that,
Mm-hmm.
But how fish are caught, which fish that you want to um purchase, it's
Yeah.
maturation is faster, is more sustainable item than something like bluefin that takes, 30 years to mature. Um, is something that, we take into consideration with the menu as well as our wines also.
Yeah. Oh, tell me about the wines.
No, so wines, so I've been updating the wine menu and the sake menu for gosh, decades. And I always felt really stupid to buy this bottle of, Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, and I'm going to sell it for what? $12 a glass? Like, that's so stupid. So I would, I'm like, so I focused my distributors. I said, told all my distributors, I will only look at wines that are biodynamic or sustainably farmed that are in this area. I don't need to
Mm.
make a carbon footprint of something that and ship it across the world to sell this for $12, And then,
Yeah.
and I tried to just support family owned farms and family businesses to,
Mhm.
really put my dollar there. So all my distributors now know, like, these are the only wines that Lumi will look at and don't even bother showing her anything else.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Lowers the shipping costs,
Yeah.
and California is full of great wine. There's great
Yes.
wine kind of all over the place. Love
Right.
it.
Don't need to
Low
ship it
hanging
from
fruit.
on the other side of the world.
I'm sure it's delicious, but
Yeah.
New Zealand restaurants can drink
Right.
that. Lumi, this has been a fantastic conversation. I thank you so much for sharing this and really commend you for everything you're doing at Fuki Sushi. I wish every restaurant was like yours. Do you
Thank
have
you.
any closing thoughts or advice you want to share with any restaurant owners or people who work at restaurants or customers even?
Mhm. I would say, it's just really important to ask questions. It's, this whole thing of, oh, it's, sustainability and hashtag this. It's actually really important, and it really adds up. Um, especially in restaurants, in schools, in
Mm,
hotels, all these little things adds up. And I wanted to make a difference with my restaurant and this little thing that I can do. And if any restaurants want to ask me any questions, I am more than happy to help and, do whatever I can to, um, make a difference in their small world and in their small world. And then we can all collectively help one another to um, protect our resources.
yeah, that's so generous of you. And I'm sure our listeners will take you up on that. Well, Lumi, thank you so much again. This has been fantastic. Moral of the story for everybody, ask questions, talk about this, dig a little deeper, see what you can uncover. And what I'm really pleased to hear in pretty much everything you shared is like you can do what's right for the planet and the bottom line and actually help improve those margins in the restaurant industry, which I
Yes.
don't think people realize at surface level. So that's
No.
great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And vote with your dollar and take your practices home with you, and teach your kids those
Yeah.
practices.
So true. Well, I hope everyone has enjoyed today's episode. And if you have a story to share about Climate Action Network, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks. I'm Louisa, and this is Any Job Can Be a Climate Job.